Hey guys. So this week I wanted to focus on the intellect attribute, um, which increases the max mana and spell power of the player. So each spell in the game is going to have some kind of base damage, and it's going to be multiplied by the spell power of the player, which I said before is increased by the intellect stat. So before I go into the testing of each, I figure I'll go into the code. Now, this past week too, I started learning more about the HDRP, high definition render pipeline, and things are a little bit slower, but it looks much better than it was. Um, and I'll have to learn more about this through just trial and error. But it has some pretty cool effects with the fire and ice, and I think it definitely looks better than what it looked like before. So before I go into the testing, let me pull up the scripts and show you what this combat uh, is actually doing from the script side. So first off, we have the spell combat script, and before I had a separate class for every spell, but that was just getting too out of hand. So I made one script called spell combat, which handles the actual uh, control. So when this is active, so in the action slot, I won't get into too much on that, but in the action slots, there's 10 action slots. If one on the left hand's activated or one on the right hand's activated, uh, this script is attached to each spell that's being cast. So pretty much when a spell is activated, so let's say spell fireball, it pulls up the effect and it puts a game object by the player's hand, whichever one's active, and that game object has this spell combat script attached to it. So while that's active, if there's a left hand or right hand spell active and the player presses, left mouse, if the active left hand spell is, or if there's an active left hand spell, and then same thing for the right hand, but I'm using the right mouse button. So how it works right now is if the player clicks on an enemy, it and I'm using tags right now. So if it clicks on the enemy and the tag is enemy, it uses the spell and casts the coroutine cast spell. Now further down here we have the cast spell, which pretty much makes it so for a second or second to 2 seconds the player is busy, which means it can't cast anything else. So this prevents any kind of movement or anything like that while the player is casting. So it plays the spell animation. It waits a certain number of seconds, which is based on the player's speed, which, as shown in last week's video, is based on the agility. And it instantiates the spell effect. So, like I said before, I used to have a separate game object for each spell. It was getting too crazy. So right now I have a spell effects manager, which handles, right now I have 3 spells, which based on the spell name, it allows you to pick whatever one. So this one would be Fireball or Ice Orb, whatever is active currently. So it instantiates a spell effect. It makes a sound, which I'll work on some other time. Right now I haven't really done much with sound. And then it creates a new spell effect. Now the spell effect actually right now is set on a void update to track the enemy down, and then on collision deal the actual damage. So similar to the weapon collider I showed last week, depending on what it hits, it causes different effects. So it takes damage, and then if it's an enemy, it's going to start the coroutine collision effects, which might apply different conditions. So it might be chill effect or stun or immobilize, whatever it is. Um, that's what's it affects the enemy with the enemy conditions script. And based on the player's intellect, as I said before, it does a multiplier effect on the actual spell damage. So for this video, I wanted to try out 15 intellect, 150 intellect, and 300 intellect. I also set my agility to 100 so I can cast a little bit more quickly for this testing and speed it up a bit. So now I just want to get into the testing part, and yeah. All right, so on to the testing side of intellect. So starting off with 15 intellect, the player's going to start off with 15 of each attribute. So this is going to be the lowest the player's intellect can be. So I'm alternating here between like the fireball and the ice. Eventually, I'm going to have the fireball deal a little bit more damage than the ice, but the ice has a chill effect, so you could see it actually changes the skin mesh renderer of the bandit. And I'll have to tweak the amount of mana each spell costs, but you can see it's already draining the mana. And the intellect is actually increases max mana. So next phase, I wanted to do 150. So you can see it's almost double the damage there, and pretty much they go down more quickly. And you can see in the background, well, there's a bonfire, and that came along with the sample particle effects with the HDRP, high definition render pipeline that Unity offers. So I kind of use the same kind of effect for the fireball, and then I just changed the color for the ice. So for 150 intellect, it does about double damage, and just picking up some items on the way. Before, you showed some item with a missing material. That's because all the materials change when you go from lightweight to high definition. So going to 300 intellect, again, it's like about triple damage now, a little more than triple. And I'll have to think about if I want to tweak the spell effects, because right now they're just homing in on the enemy. I don't know if I'll leave it like that. It might be too easy if you click on the enemy and it goes right to him, but at the same time, I mean, I'm not looking to make a super complicated combat system either. So I'll have to trial and error as I go, but right now everything's working as intended. The intellect is factoring into increased damage, and I'm just interested to see what else I could do with this new HDRP. Next week, Fortitude. Thanks for watching.